Let's go into the National Security Act of 1947 because it impacts what is going on now and will be looked at into restructuring it back, a bit like the IRS and the tax revenue people. So it was a major restructuring. Restructuring is a bit of a misnomer of the United States government's military and intelligence agencies following World War II, except it was already in planning during and before. Now, the majority of the provisions of the Act took effect on September the 18th, 1947, the day after the Senate confirmed James Forrestal as the first Secretary of Defense. More about him later. Now, the Act merged the Department of War and renamed as the Department of the Army and the Department of the Navy into the National Military Establishment. Remember, the Navy is connected to SSP. They run it, which was then headed by the Secretary of Defense. It also created the Department of the Air Force and the United States Air Force, which separated the Army Air Forces into its own service. And it also protected the Marine Corps as an independent service under the Department of the Navy. Now, aside from military reorganisation, the Act established the National Security Council, National Security, and also, go figure, the Central Intelligence Agency, clowns in America. Now, the US's first peacetime non-military intelligence agency was the CIA. First peacetime. But of course, our members know there was the OSS, SS being the most prominent letters, before the CIA. Now, the Act and its changes, along with the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan is Marduk's control system, by the way, were major components of the Truman's administration Cold War strategy. Or so we are told. And yet the Cold War, this is 1947, the Cold War didn't start until 1950. Oops. When the US got involved in a war between North and South Korea. Funny how history throws up these strange anomalies in the timeline. A bit like the archaeological thing in Egypt and Jerusalem. Now, the signing for this bill took place aboard Truman's VC-54C presidential aircraft called Sacred Cow, which is the original Air Force One. So what is the terminology of Sacred Cow? It's kind of fitting. A person or thing immune to criticism or questioning. Right in your face. As in, the rules governing the press conference have become a sacred cow in this administration. Yes, that clearly fits the bill within politics. The first Air Force One was named after a person or thing immune to criticism or questioning, which is exactly why all this national security was set up. No oversight, you see. Now, the day after the Senate confirmed James Forrestal as the first Secretary of Defense, and his power was initially limited, and it was difficult for him to exercise the authority to make the office effective. Why? Because people were interfering in the background. And this was later changed in an amendment to the Act in 1949, creating what was to become the Department of Defense, the DoD. Now, Forrestal only lasted 1 year after being critical of Israel and in favour of Arabs and Palestinians. Forrestal clashed with journalists and politicians alike during this time, and then he suddenly developed a non-defined illness described as going in a daze and was whisked from DC to Florida. Then on to Bethesda, if I said that right, or Bethesda, Maryland Hospital, who then declared him mentally unstable, whereby they then placed him in a room on the 16th floor of a building where he subsequently fell out of the window and died. As a quirk of fate, it may seem, or a conspiracy, it was stated that President Roosevelt was also under stress like Forrestal, and was announced that he was under stress and suffering mental disposition. Roosevelt attended the same Bethesda Hospital, I know one of those pronunciations is right, in Maryland for testing. Not long after that, he developed a headache, slumped in his chair, and died aged just 63. Make of that what you will. Now, the American myth of you can't serve more than 2 terms goes out of the window with Roosevelt. He was on his 4th term as president when he died. All in all, he was president for just over 12 years. But this act set up the base for the modern US military and agencies being outside of the control of the government or the Congress, presented as being standardised and slimming down, but what it really meant was it was fattening it up and having zero oversight to then launch death and destructions against various countries that never attacked America once, and became the focal point of the military might, not of America, but of the control system.